Hi, folks. Welcome. I'm Lars, and I'm here with Fernando, and we're going to be talking about the lunar nodes, Rahu and Ketu. And this is hopefully going to be the first in a series of videos that I'm going to make with a few different astrology friends, where we're just going to be discussing the lunar nodes and opening a dialogue about what they mean and the different meanings that people ascribe to them, from the ancient texts and the old astrologers and traditions versus kind of the modern interpretations, the typical modern interpretations. And of course, there's quite a lot of variety. So what we're hoping to do is just kind of freely explore it and, share our own thoughts and ideas on it and talk about, again, what some other astrologers have said and, see if we can just explore the subject pretty deeply. So thanks for joining me in this, Fernando. How's it going?
I'm very good. Thank you for inviting me, Lars. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Likewise, likewise. Cool. So I guess we'll just jump right into it here. Basically, yeah, this started because, to be honest, I was, as I conveyed to you, I was getting kind of annoyed with some of the nodal interpretations that are popular, and I can't say I'm as militantly annoyed anymore. I've sort of chilled out, kind of just like relaxed and opened up. But it was mainly kind of like this notion of, typically in modern astrologers, actually now it's happening in certain circles of what's called Vedic astrology too. But it's big in evolutionary astrology and psychological astrology and stuff. This sort of notion that the South Node is our accumulated experiences and perhaps our past life stuff, and the North Node is like where we need to go, where we should go, or where we're headed, and that sort of thing. And I thought, well, it's just such a strange contrast because we don't really find this as much in the older traditions, Instead, we find in both Hellenistic and Indian texts alike that both nodes are highly cruel, malefic, unwieldy points. They both cause upset to the planets, houses, and signs they're in / conjunct. And so it's like, where did this all come from? Where did this change occur? And as we had talked about at one point, we think that it's sort of started with Dane Rudyard, and then it kind of evolved into a string of other things. So I guess on that note, did you have anything you wanted to say as kind of an intro to this stuff?
Sure. I mean, that's the biggest Achilles heel of the whole argument, right? But it creates a sort of conundrum because, as I told you before, the idea of past life, future lives, or let's say what we are here to discover, fits perfectly with this concept of what we've done and what we haven't done.
Sure.
So the concept of Rahu being what we're here to do, Rahu being what I call Rahu the dharmic calling, right? Our higher calling, our inspiration, and Ketu, I call it the karmic past, right? And the idea of accumulative experiences, of accumulative knowledge about something that resembles Ketu, and the idea of something that we haven't discovered resembling Rahu, fits very well with this idea of past lives and future lives. But at the same time, although logical, although very easily understood, it creates an epistemological problem from a religious point of view, because not only does the ancient writings, Brihadarashara Shastra, or you can go to Hellenistic writings, they never say anything about past lives, future lives.
Right.
As you correctly said, they say they're malefic, right? And Hellenistic astrologers sometimes don't even consider the South Node. And sometimes the North Node is considered negative, but it's considered positive for some things. And at the same time, with Parashara, although they're negative, Rahu and Ketu in square or trine are very good for certain types of yogas. So, we see a little polyvalence here, but in a way, we never see evidence of past life, future lives. But before that, what I wanted to say is that the real epistemological, religious, philosophical problem arises when we read the Gita, right? And the Gita says that the spirit, I like to call it the spirit, right? The
Okay.
soul, I associate it more with the moon than the mind and the ego consciousness.
Okay.
The spirit never dies, never was born. It was always,
Sure.
it always was. It always was. It always is. So if the spirit always is, right? If our seed, our little piece of jiva, right? Or like our personal part of atma in it, right? Was always the same way it was, then how can it be evolving? How can it have past experiences?
Very good point.
How can it not have these experiences here, right? So, I mean, this argument creates some problems, and I have some ideas how to solve it, right? And we can delve into that. But in a way, how can the spirit be evolving, right? I mean,
right.
What's evolving is our manas. What's evolving is our ego consciousness, is our mind soul, right? It's how
the impermanent parts of ourselves are seemingly evolving.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, we are evolving since I was born till I die, and that's it. And this concept also brings to mind the problematic interpretation that the West has with reincarnation. People think that reincarnation is that I'm coming back the same way. I'm Fernando, and then I'm coming back as another Fernando, and Lars is coming back as another Lars. But Fernando, me, is just my manas, it's just my ego, it's just my soul mind. That's the moon in many ways.
Right, the moon, yeah.
The soul, the atma, that's what's coming back. And in a way, reincarnation, it's not a reappearance, it's a recycling of yourself. And you are coming back, but you are not coming back. You know what I mean? You only live once, right? You only live once with the characteristics you have.
YOLO.
And then YOLO, exactly. I'm going to tattoo that here, right? YOLO. YOLO, actually, that's a really good way to put it. Like, that's the YOLO paradigm.
The YOLO
paradigm. You only live once, man.
Yeah,
and
well,
if you only live once, then you're not coming back. You got to realize that this idea of evolution is just a current life station. Yes. Although we could argue that several lifespans create a segment of evolution for yourself, but that would be, extrapolating other philosophical concepts. But, these are the problems that we are facing with this idea that you say, that although it is very logical, it makes sense, people have been doing it for years, decades, it creates an epistemological problem that is seldom discussed like we're discussing right now.
Yes, very well said. I'm excited to jump more into these metaphysical concepts with you here. I want to point out that in reviewing what Rudyard had written about the nodes in a couple of his books, I found that yes, he did mention briefly this notion of the South Node in terms of like talents and things that we may have accumulated in past lives. But he talked about it, again, as more talents, not so much as like negative samskaras or things like that. Very much the word he used was talent. But I want to emphasize that he really doesn't think of the nodes in terms of past life and kind of future life stuff, and he doesn't seem to suggest that the nodes are having necessarily to do with the evolution of the soul. Instead, he talks about the sort of the building of the personality, which is very much, an external thing. That's very much dealing with karmas and samskaras. That's not dealing with the essential spiritual nature or soul self, as we call it, So I think what is problematic is, especially with evolutionary astrologers, they talk about this evolutionary process of the soul. But this is deeply problematic, as you said, because none of the ancient wisdom traditions seem to talk about an evolving soul.
Because it's a modern concept.
Yeah, it's a modern concept, whether we're talking about Buddhism, where, by the way, there is no soul in many of the Buddhist cosmologies, there's just the mind stream, which just sort of collects karmas and streams from body to body, life to life, so it's really impersonal. It's really just like you're kind of just a bundle of karmic patterns that's built around this stream of consciousness called the mind stream. Or Taoism, there's no talk of that in Taoism, of course.
Is there reincarnation in Taoism?
There may be. I'm not an expert on Taoism, but in the Indian tradition, yeah, there's no major discussion of that. Instead, when we get to Advaita Vedanta, what we find instead is this radical deconstruction of these doctrines. We find these statements that basically you are already perfect. You could have not been created or uncreated. You could not have been, there's no such thing as bondage. Your very bondage is a complete and utter illusion. How could you, if you're uncreated and all pervading, how could you ever have been bound to begin with? So the very notion of a process that's evolutionary is not only absent from this ancient literature, but vehemently criticized and denied by the Advaita philosophers, which you can study in texts like the Ashtavakra Gita or the Avaduta Gita by Dattatreya, and there's innumerable other texts. In the modern day, the sage Sri Aurobindo, who is a 20th century Indian mystic and yogi, he talks about how you've got basically the Jivatman, which is the more impersonal like ray of the oversoul, the Paramatman, and that's felt above the head. And that shoots forth another ray of itself, which stands behind the heart, which he calls the Chataya Parusha. And that's what most people think of as the individual soul, is behind the heart, not the heart center, but just behind the heart. It's no bigger than the edge of your thumb, supposedly, according to the
in Anahata chakra.
Yeah, the unstruck chakra, Anahata. And so that heart soul self is basically what governs and associates itself with the realm of matter. So with our physical, emotional, vital, and mental sheaths. And it itself is, again, it's not evolving. But Aurobindo explains it governs the evolution of the external sheaths. And so, like, what do we mean by evolution of external sheaths? Well, as you go through life, right, you learn things and you change and you acquire knowledge and you rethink things and blah blah blah. So there is change. There is like a perceived process going on, but that's only the external level. And the final thing I wanted to say on this is that these older traditions, they're really, you're not going to find in any holy books, make sure you go do these things in order to evolve. You won't find it in the Quran or in the Pentateuch or in the the sayings of Christ and so on. You just won't find that. It's not there anywhere. There's no north node, south node concept. And really what it amounts to is what we think of as spiritual evolution is actually just a deconditioning. It's like a remembering of who we are by the external self, right? It's like you're clearing away something that's all stuff that's covering up something that's already there, like brush in a field. Those are the karmas and the samskaras, right? The mental attitudes and behavioral patterns. You're clearing those away so that they no longer obstruct with the glorious spirit that you already are. And another good metaphor is, it's like wax paper covering a candle. And, the flame is always burning brightly, but we can't necessarily see it as well. So as you remove the wax paper, there's no evolution. The flame is already there burning. It just appeared that there was an evolution to the ego mind, basically. So,
man, I come from a perennial school, the idea of tradition and modernity, and just let's take the word evolution. Where does it come from? It's a modern term. It's a modern term from modern science, from Darwinism to a certain extent. So we're dealing here with a concept that is 300 years old at most, right?
Probably less, right? Because
it's less. But I'm just.
But at most, maybe giving
at most, late 18th, early 19th. But the idea is that and this is a perennial law, you know, being is always superior to becoming, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And the idea of evolution is a purely modern concept
Yeah.
because as we've said repeatedly, traditional writings never talk about these new agey, more modern concepts that are these things about you know, you got to do this because Rahu is here and that's what you got to do. I mean, sure, I could do that and I should do that, but does that have to do with the evolution of the soul? With the spirit, I'm sorry, with the evolution of the spirit? I mean, if the spirit is perfect, then why does it need to do these
Right.
things, right? And the idea is, okay, you did this in previous lives, now you have to do that, but that kind of doesn't make sense, right?
It's a little linear, you know?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
very linear and kind of myopic to me. So,
Well, you know, I wouldn't say myopic. I would say more like, you know, it's a way to interpret it because these are
yeah,
not
okay, fair enough.
subjects to understand. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, myopic would be like, you know, absolute negation or absolute affirmation. You
I
know
guess I
what I
was
mean?
thinking I might be misusing the word. I was thinking myopic almost as like a type of like narrow tunnel vision of
Oh,
like
sure. I understand that.
it's only this way, and we just got to go from point A to point B, and forget about like all the beautiful graffiti on the wall of the tunnel,
Yeah,
and forget
yeah,
about like these secret passages in the tunnel
yeah.
that actually can take you like on a shortcut or take you to somewhere you didn't expect. You know, it's that kind of thing.
You know, my idea is if it's not bad because the thing is that it logically works, but
Sure.
epistemologically it creates a dilemma,
A
right?
dilemma, yeah.
A paradox to a certain extent, and that's
Right,
what we're talking about.
because the
Yeah,
whole thing, yeah, the whole thing of the ancient masters is that there's what they're all teaching is there's nothing to do. Just remain as you already are, well established in your own self, Atman, you know? That's like that's the teaching in a nutshell, basically. And so
but
but it's
people
hard for us.
who don't have moksha positions are not gonna like that.
Maybe not. Yeah. Well, it's hard for the mind, and you know we've all been lost in it. Otherwise, we'd
Yeah.
be enlightened or whatever. And you know, but it's hard for the mind to grasp that. Oh crap! I don't really have to do anything, and actually, I'm not really that important.
Yeah.
Especially for Westerners, you know, there's really there's a ethos in the West, especially in America, with this manifest destiny, like just take whatever you want kind of thing. Just keep expanding, just keep overdoing the Jupiter, you know, and then, you know, just take whatever you want and just get bigger and bigger and bigger, you know, and pretty soon there's nothing else. You can only see my big fat forehead, you know, if I keep doing that. So it's just like, I think it's hard for Westerners to grasp this idea that you're really not important in the grand scheme of things in the way you think that you are, you know, or
Well,
that's often
collectively,
perpetuated.
yeah. Individually, I mean, you are the most important thing to yourself, and being
Sure,
honest to
sure.
yourself is probably like the main thing you have to follow, right?
Right.
Some people are going to be inclined towards some things, other to others, but you know that has to do with the planets per se. But here with the nodes, I mean, the dharmic calling is calling you, and Rahu always calls one to do things that one is
Yeah.
not aware of or that one has no experiences on. And Ketu, you know, is something that we already know. So in a way, if the spirit, I'm sorry, let's use the correct words. If the spirit is perfect, then how did we get these experiences? And why don't we have these other experiences? Because that happens. And
Right.
what I think is that we're just simply allotted this chart. You know, it's like a game, you know.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that's the only way I can explain it, right? It's like, Fernando, you got to be born here and you got to do this, Rahu, and you got to do this, Ketu. Good luck. you know, you know what I mean? That's the only way I can see it. It's the idea that it's not an evolution. It's just mainly consciousness experiencing itself through other consciousness or through itself, through individual self-consciousness working together or living together or whatever they do together. So I see it more like a game, like this is your Ketu, these are your things, and this is your Rahu, and that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
But the idea of you got to do it to evolve, you got to do it because your spirit has to learn. I mean,
No,
the only way I can
doesn't
justify
make sense.
that, it doesn't make sense because it creates a paradigm. And the only
Yeah.
way I can rationalize it and explain it in my humble point of view, that's just a game, right? Because in a way, as you said, you know, and that's where Neptune comes in, the idea that everything's illusionary, that an illusion, you
Yeah.
know, and how it comes in contact with Saturn, the idea of the harsh reality, but Neptune tells you, you know, it's just an illusion. It's a harsh illusion, but
Yeah.
it's all we've got. And I think that's part of the game. It's that we are drawn into this illusion, and we got to live our things, and we got to do our things. And that Rahu is like, you know, the game, right? The prize, the boss.
Sure, it's the thing we're constantly chasing and being driven to devour because it's the head of a dragon or a demon, mythologically speaking.
Exactly.
Um,
And you know, it presents some dangers, it presents some difficulties, and this is why it's a malefic in principle, the
yes.
nodes, because they can take us on creating more karma, on developing more sanskaras, on accumulating more credit for future encounters with the material world. So, you know, that's how I see it. You know, how can we remove this very logical philosophical approach to the nodes that, however, create a philosophical paradigm and substitute it with this one? I mean, you got to do Rahu not because these are the things that make you evolve, the things that you need to do to complete your evolution of the spirit, which is, I don't think it's true. It's that you got to do these things if you want to, right? You got to do these things if you want to, because it's a game, and that's the goal. That's the boss. That's I mean, you pass the level. I mean, that's how I see it. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can't disagree with you. I think there's definitely a ton of truth to what you just said. It made me think of a few different things as well while you were talking. So like this, you know, this concept of destiny.
Yeah, and I was going to talk about that. You first.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, destiny is an important concept, but I think what often happens in this world today is that we equate destiny with something that's outside ourselves, that's going to descend upon us and change our life. You know, because we all hear these like life-changing stories of people going through these grand kind of trials and tribulations, or they're down on their luck, and then somebody comes and picks them up. A good example is like this young hip hop artist, Afro, who at 16 won this hip hop competition hosted by R.A. the Rugged Man, if anybody's into hip hop. But anyway, this kid is just brilliant, just a genius. Like he literally read the dictionary growing up and just like taught himself to rap at a highly virtuosic level. And, you know, at 16, he wins this competition and explodes, which is awesome, right? So it's kind of like that's what we tend to think of. But if you really thought about like his story or any story like that, you'd find, well, but it's not like it just came to him. It's like this is what he really wanted. He worked hard at it because that's what all of his energy was focused towards. So destiny is not outside ourselves. It's something we are creating in accordance with our essential nature. And
that's why astrology works in a way,
right,
because you see it. Yeah,
exactly. And our essential nature, we know it's our essential nature because it feels good to do it. It's like it brings like a love and a joy. It's, you know, it's a fifth house kind of thing if we want to go there. And so what's funny about the nodes is they are kind of this axis of destiny. There's this like deep-seated compulsion towards something, but they're blinders. They blind us, you know, because they obscure the sun and the moon during the eclipses. So they create a fog or darkening. And so I think with the nodes, it's not something you can really like intellectually comprehend. It's something that you can kind of comprehend, but then you're not going to discover what they really mean until you're actually doing it and being it for real. And that's what's so funny about the nodes, is it's easy to get into this headspace of like, oh, if you've got the North Node in like an air sign, you gotta like, you know, be more in relationships and associate more with people, and your destiny is tied up in this and blah, blah, blah. And I can't say those things aren't necessarily true, but the intellectual concept really doesn't come anywhere near the actual like investigation of it personally. You know, you have to just throw yourself into that, and you don't know what it's going to be, because like, and I can give another example from my own life. That this is like a very like Rahu related thing for me. I was obsessed with this person that I had once been like romantically interested in, and I just couldn't shake this for like years. It just kept like showing up and kind of rearing its ugly, you know, head like some dragon coming out of a sewer.
Don't worry, I've been there. I understand.
Yeah, I know your chart a little enough to know that, yeah, you would understand. And so, you know, I'm just obsessed with this. And I'm like, okay, I can't, because I was like suppressing it and stuff. And again, this is related to my Rahu placement, not Ketu. And so I was like, okay, I just have to deal with this. Like, I don't know why I'm so obsessed. I just have to deal with this. So I decided to get back in touch with this person. And after 2 failed attempts, I was successful in getting their contact information the 3rd attempt. And then I had the contact information. I was like, wow, I've gotten this far. Weird. And I was like,
oh, you're talking about your stalking adventures. Continue.
Sort of. Yeah. So anyway, so I texted the person, and they never got back to me.
Obviously.
But this weird thing happened where basically after I did that, the compulsion, the desire, the frustration, all of that just evaporated as though it was never there. It just completely evaporated. So you might look and say, oh, you know, he's got this Rahu placement there, so he should be doing these types of things with relationship and so on. But what's funny about that is it's just a matter of, to me, it's not a matter of necessarily doing it. It's a matter of just kind of innocently investigating it and just being open and just not trying to control the compulsory nature of the nodes. Like, they're a compulsion. So you're not trying to control them. You're just investigating them. What will happen if I do this? Because I can't stop thinking about it. I just can't. You know, it's haunting my dreams. It's haunting, you know. And then you go do it and you find out, oh, actually, it's not even a big deal. It wasn't even what I thought it would be.
It's not even there. It's
not even there. Yeah.
It's a shadowy planet. It's just a mathematical point. And in a sense, the whole lore with the nodes is mysterious and confusing because they don't even exist. We're just alluding to a mathematical point that it's not physically there. And, you know, maybe when we're 42, 43, when Rahu matures, maybe we'll understand it. And 48, when Ketu matures.
Right.
You know, I had the luck of going through Rahu Mahadasha. And Rahu,
born into it, baby.
Yeah, you were born into. Yeah, and mine came like when I was in 2nd grade. And I just came
wow.
in 2007, like 10 years ago. But the idea is that when you go through that Mahadasha, that it's 18 years, you're basically getting into a carousel, and you are starting at a point, and 18 years later you get off from the carousel and you're at the same point. And the whole experience is very confusing. It's like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's Rahu. And you went through it, you matured in many ways, because as you said, like, your example was perfect. You know, you like something, you are obsessed with it, and you spent 18 years working for it, and I got to do this, I got to do that, and I'm doing it. And then, you know, then Rahu Mars comes in and whoosh, destroys everything that you did. And then you realize you step down from the carousel and you say, what did I do for the last 18 years? And then Jupiter starts, and then wisdom starts. So you see here that even the Mahadasha, how it's explained, right? And how I use it.
Beautiful stuff.
Mm-hmm. The real wisdom comes with Jupiter, not with Rahu. Rahu, you slip on the banana and you fall. You keep running and you keep sleeping, but you keep doing it because you have no experiences there and it's calling you, right? But then with Jupiter, you realize that, I've already done that. So let's do this because we already know what's there. So in a sense, it's a very confusing thing. And
it is,
once you do Rahu things, you realize that it's an illusion, right? The fear you had of doing something, and then you do it and you realize, why did I have this fear? You know, the idea that this is going to be difficult, and then you do it and it's not that difficult. You know, the illusory aspect of it is very present, and hence the explanation for the notes are going to be complicated, are going to be, you know, shadowy. We have this perfect example right here, how this philosophical argument fits perfectly with what the classics say to a certain degree, but to another degree, it doesn't make sense because it's just a modern interpretation of evolutionary principles applied to something that is perennial, you know, to that little drop of Godhead that's within our heart, you know. And then how do we justify it, right? I've created this idea of the game. You know, you can also say that maybe you live a certain type of amount of lives and they are more or less connected. I mean, those are two hypotheses which could go hand by hand with this third hypothesis that we're discussing that creates a very difficult problem, which is the idea of the spirit evolving, right? And you know, you even see the mythology of the Vedas, specifically concerning, if I'm not incorrect, the Vishnu Purana, where they talk about the tale of Svarvanu, which is the Asura that was beheaded by Vishnu when he turned into Mohini Avatara to spread the Amrita, which was the nectar of immortality, to the Devas when they were fighting the Asuras. And then he just... it's very funny because, I mean, there are a couple of guys there, and there's this guy that nobody has ever seen. And he gets in line, and it's like, who the fuck is this guy? I mean, that's what. But it's very funny.
It's a good story,
because there's not like 1,000. There's just a few guys. I mean, but the idea that he got there and he drank the Amrita, and then the sun and moon, you know,
snitched on him.
Tattletale? How do you say that?
Snitched or tattled. Hey, this guy's he's not a deva, he's an asura.
He just shaved his mustache. And the thing is that, you know, Mohini Avatara then turns into Vishnu, and then he cuts his head, but it's too late, they're immortal. So, you know, the allusions that they're negative come from the idea that they're an asura, that they're a dragon, that they're a devil. But asuras are basically, you know, gods that are independent, right? Like the Luciferian concept of an angel that just rebels against his master. So it's the idea of disharmony, right? But in a way, he got punished already, right? And I don't know if I mean, I'm not an expert on these topics, but I don't know if Rahu or Ketu reappear in other Puranas later on to see how they're doing, right? Are they regretful? I mean, obviously they are pissed off with the sun and moon, and that's why they cause, you know, eclipses, right? But how are they? Like, they've already been punished. They're immortal. Are they bitter with the sun and moon? Yes, but besides that, you know, they're bitter with our mind. They're bitter with our spirit, with our manas and our atma.
Yeah.
But besides that, where does this idea of, you know, this is what we got to do to evolve, and this is what we've done.
Yeah.
Where does it come from? I mean, where's the space for that? And,
where's the space for it, right? And from these,
and that's the problem here with the traditional concepts and the modern concepts. Yeah. And you know, the modern concepts are not perennial, so they're becoming, while the traditional concepts are perpetual, perennial. Hence, they are,
being, right?
In my philosophical outlook, you know, superior to those. However, these concepts fit logically. And they work, you know, mentally, logically.
They work.
That's a double paradigm right there.
Well, there's a few things I definitely want to say about that. I don't really like this concept of doing, you know, and I don't like this idea of should.
Of action.
Shoulding on people. You should do this.
Oh, sure, but that's like another.
Yeah, well, it was
dimension.
It wasn't about the nodes, but like I remember an astrology friend of mine a long time ago, like was telling about a dilemma I was having, and he was like, oh, well, based on where Saturn is transiting now, like you need to do this, you need to resolve this, you need to make it work because it's important for your evolution. And I was like, okay, why was I just shoulded on, like it was such a weird feeling. And it was just like,
because you were a rebel.
well, it was just kind of like, I did resolve the stuff. I knew I had to resolve it, but the idea that I had to force it to be working because it just was something that was not working. And that's okay. It's like, okay, it's not working. We gave it a shot. We screwed up. We made mistakes. No big deal. But there's no point in forcing it to go forward, especially not for some weird like evolutionary idea. But yeah, go ahead.
And with Saturn, you have 2.5 years to resolve things when it's going through a house or a cusp or whatever.
Sure. That's a good point.
And it's going to resolve itself. And, I've come to know Saturn transits in the past 6 years, more or less. And, every time he enters a new house, I kind of realized that the Saturnian things never end. You think that, oh, I'm going through my Saturn return. Oof, I'm so glad that's over. But the idea is, no, it never ends. Time never ends.
Saturn's always transiting somewhere and aspecting something.
Yeah, and there's something happening. So,
and same with the notes.
You don't have to do something. You could do it. And, I mean, you're getting that out of the way in a way. But, things resolve themselves organically if you are really honestly living the life you should be living, right?
Yeah.
I have a theory that if you live your life as you're supposed to do it, then you're going to be born and you're going to die when you got to die, right? But if you live your life in a way that it's not supposed to be the way you're doing,
inharmonious,
and you get out of the game earlier. And that's what I think. That's just my personal opinion.
I've seen that happen in people. And, some people might be tempted to say, well, but Lars, how do you know that? And I can't say that intuition.
It's hypothesis.
But I can't say, yes, I know it for a fact. But it's just, you see things and it's logical, it's rational in a less linear way,
Of course. And the power of the mind. I mean, whatever you think is pretty strongly gonna influence what you think is truth,
Right.
And you have that choice, you have that free will to determine what you're gonna believe in, Some people believe in Allah. Some people believe in winning the lottery. Some people believe in American Idol, and that's the world. That's the illusion they created.
Great.
Right? And that's not, it's not that something is better than the other. It's just, you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you just got to feel genuine, and this is why, sometimes people bashing on people who just like to go to malls or people who just like to, watch these Hollywood shows on TV. I mean, let them be, man. Not everybody's a Brahman. Not everybody's a Kshatriya. Not everybody is a Vaishya. Some people are Shudra. Some people are Mleshas. Some people are Parias. You just got to let it be, and you just got to be yourself, and that's it, right? And with this Rahu Ketu thing, I mean, in terms of counseling, which is just another issue, I think the idea that telling the client, these areas are not your forte, right? So if you want to develop yourself in terms of your life experiences in this life, right? In that context, not in the context of your spirit is evolving and you got to do this because, it's in this life, you have Rahu in the 7th. That's a difficult, having the nodes in the Kendras is difficult per se.
Yes.
But in 1-7, I think it's the most difficult one. And, you're going to be drawn to people who are false, who are illusory. Yeah. And you got to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
Does that entail that by doing this, you are evolving spiritually from a current incarnation point of view? Yes. But does that mean that that's like the evolution that your eternal spirit has to do? No, man, because he's perennial.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's a question of semantics, right?
Well,
you gotta encapsulate that meaning in terms of your current incarnation, in terms of your current ego mind, which, by the way, is going to die also. Like, you
Yeah.
die
Hmm.
physically, and
Absolutely.
then in esoterical writings, they say there's a second death, that's when your soul mind dies, your mind. The idea of I am Fernando, the idea that you are Lars, that has to die,
Yeah, that
because
dies.
that's
Yeah.
the reason why I don't remember who I was before. That's the
Right.
reason. And that's also like a justification of ghosts in many ways. Ghosts are these manas that are still, someplace around there that haven't been able to die
Yep.
because of several reasons. And that's my explanation for ghosts and spirits in many ways.
Most of the time, yeah, they're
Not ghosts,
astral
not spirits like like
nature
angels.
spirits and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
no,
yeah,
that's
ghosts
another thing.
are like an astral sort of
Yeah,
shadow
that's
of
another
the
thing. We're talking
person.
about ghosts, but
Right.
yeah,
That gets
which
left
which
behind.
by the way is
Rahu Ketu.
is a Ketu, right? Ketu holding on, right?
Sure, sure.
I'm holding on to my phone and I'm not letting go. I'm
Yeah,
holding
because
on to and
Ketu is about rejection. So like you're
yeah.
rejecting something. But yeah,
And
if I,
I've had experiences with ghosts, and the thing is
me
that
too,
when
yeah.
you learn about, I once was in a haunted house and I slept there,
Wow.
and I saw the spirits in my dreams, and then I learned the stories
Wow.
about them, and it was a tragic story. I'm
Wow.
feeling it right now. It was a very a mistress and an illegitimate child, and
Oh, wow.
these
Yeah.
traumas are there, and you're holding on to that pain, right? And that's what ghosts are in many ways.
Yeah.
And that's like the second death that never happened. That's my opinion, of course. Other people are going to have other things to say,
Yeah.
but the idea is that it's also a significator of Ketu, which are holding on to the manas, right? Not the atma, the manas,
Well,
because the manas has to die in order for the atma to be released, or do whatever it has to do to go back to
I
samskara, or to go to another
I
place, or
mean,
God knows what.
the way I would look at it is that it's K2 more because it's otherworldly and kind of diffuse and not focalized and stuff.
Perfect. That's
And
true
that's
also.
another way to look at it. Yeah. But I wanted to say a few important things, before we decide to end the video, whenever that is, right? But is that like, so first of all, like there's this concept in evolutionary astrology where, Pluto squaring the nodes means there was a skipped step. There was something you didn't do in a past life that hindered your spiritual evolution. And to me, it's concepts like this that I can't say it's wrong, but to me, it reeks of sort of a Judeo-Christian original sin idea that like you did or did not do this thing, and now it is interfering with you or something like that. So
Unconsciously, yeah.
yeah. But again, I approach it more as like the nodes, both of them, are a deep-seated compulsion, right? That it's not that we have to, like, excuse me, if our north node is in the seventh, that doesn't mean we have to go get married. That just means that,
No,
yeah, that just
you don't
means
have
that,
to get married.
right? That just means that the seventh house themes,
Do you
like,
imagine, man? Do you imagine that, telling that to like the first thing you tell to a client when you see that? You got to get married, man. You got to do it.
yeah, well, no, I
He's
mean,
gonna
no,
have
I
a
can't.
difficult time.
I
I
can't.
mean,
Right. It's a difficult time, regardless of which node is going to be in a house. And so, Rahu in the seventh is more just, or Ketu in the seventh too, is just showing some kind of compulsion concerning relationships and sexual desires and perhaps opponents or competitions or whatever the seventh house, will represent. It's some kind of deep-seated compulsion that's drawing you towards it in some way, and I'll give two examples because I have two good friends who both have these the nodes in those houses, right? So one has Rahu in that house, and they had a lot of relationship troubles. They were married like 3 times before they were 30, and so on and so forth. Very difficult marriages. They got married only because their mom wanted them to get married. They didn't even really want to get married, and it was kind of like, they just got pressured into doing it.
wow.
Another friend has Ketu there, much younger friend, and they, whenever they date people, they've dated like innumerable people. They've, you know, probably, you know, they've hooked up and stuff with innumerable people probably as well within that context. And but what they end up doing a lot of the time is they end up cheating on the person that they're with. This is a very interesting thing. It's like they get trapped in that. They feel trapped by the relationship. So to break out of it, they cheat and hope that the other person will say, okay, the relationship's over. Usually what happens is the other person is like, well, I still want to be with you. So it's a very strange cycle. But in both situations, we see the nodes at work. We see, you know, Rahu, this like trying to control things by pleasing the mother or whatever, or fitting into a mold. In Ketu, we see trying to control things by, you know, by cheating, you know, by having this like power through sexual a form of sexual aggression in a sense, perhaps. But the point is like both nodes are in a sense doing the same thing. They're both there's both compulsion, they're both control. And you know, whereas Rahu will typically make you obsessed with something to the point where you want it so bad that you pretend to be something you're not, right? Like the Asura pretending to be the Deva. And then when you get it, right, it's not what you expected. He gets the immortality, he gets cut in half, so he's jaded. So he keeps chasing the sun and the moon around because it's like, oh, this isn't what it was supposed to be. Damn it, it's ruined. But then with Ketu, right, real quick, with Ketu, you're rejecting things. And you're rejecting something that it may be very good for you. It may be something you're not using properly, right? You're rejecting it. And by rejecting it, you're trying to control it, you know? So either way, the two opposites at these extremes become the same thing. And that's where this dichotomy of like past lives, future lives, or like bad, good kind of dissolves and kind of ceases to be a really, truly strict, sharp, defined barrier or dichotomy, you know?
Earlier I was talking about the story of Svarbhanu, and I mistook the correct scripture is Shiva Mahapuran. It's not Vishnu Puran, so yeah, I'm just correcting that. But the idea here I want to convey, that you just said it, you know, Ketu is uptightness, right? It's tension. Rahu is falsehood, it's illusion, right? Okay. And they both augment, right? Rahu augments and externalizes. Ketu augments and internalizes. So we got this thing going on. And in a way, when you see the mythology, failure is inherent to the nodes.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
And the failure was the division, the decapitation, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, many times astrologers see, some astrologers just talk about Rahu, or they just talk about Ketu, when the correct way to do them is to talk about both, right? And in a way, if you talk about just one of them, then you are incurring in that failure that Svarbhanu took part in.
Right, they're one being. Yeah, they're one being.
Exactly. So in a way, when you do Rahu things without your Ketu, you are bound to failure, I believe, right? This is just philosophizing. I'm not talking from experience or anything. I'm just saying things, you know. And in a way, you have to take both notes in order to understand them correctly and bring them together, right?
Yeah.
You know, and put that head back into that body. And it's not just, you know, doing what Rahu wants you to do. It's also using that Ketu to do that Rahu. It's also doing that Rahu and merging it with that Ketu, so we could let go of that Ketu and understand that Rahu and bring them together. So in a way, more than just doing what Rahu entails, it's bringing the notes together, you know, erasing that failure that partook Svarbhanu, and, you know, amending that falsehood, amending that flaw, and redeeming Svarbhanu from the sin he committed against the Devas and against Vishnu, the all-powerful God. I mean, that's how we should be seeing it, I think.
Well, but here's the irony of that, is that it wasn't even like a sin against Vishnu, because Lord Brahma had actually
The
promised
boon.
that
Yeah.
boon to Sorbanu, because Brahma is always trying to, make everybody happy, because realistically, all the beings in these stories are kind of shitheads.
Yeah.
The Devas and the
Like
Asuras.
we are. Yeah.
Oh my God! Like when Garuda tries to, steal the Amrita in the
Yeah.
Mahabharata, like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like the Devas oppose him and stuff, and he just wipes them
I
out.
I always like the story of Ganesha's mother. Just wanted everybody to come in, and she wants to invite Saturn, and Saturn says, "No, I don't want to go there. No, come on, I'm offended." And then he goes there and he blows Ganesha's head off. So yeah, these stories are just so funny.
They are funny, yeah, they
They are
are.
funny, and in a way they hid behind all behind the semantics.
Yeah,
There are deep lessons. Like the saying goes, symbols murmur the truth in our times, and we see
yeah,
that through Svarban. We see that through these stories we're talking about.
yeah.
And where does evolution come in here?
Where
See,
does it
that's
come in?
that's the
Yeah,
problem.
it
That's the
is the
big
problem.
problem.
Yeah,
That's the big
and
problem. And it's semantics in the end. The
yeah,
idea we could use to correct this is by just eliminating the word evolving,
yeah,
eliminating the
really.
word, you know, it's better to use the
What,
words coming to
what
terms,
what's
or
funny though is that,
binding, or reuniting, or just working together. I don't know. There's so many ways we could put it.
well, this is what's funny is that Rudyard, in his book Person-Centered Astrology, which is a collection of essays more than a book, he sort of evolved his thinking on the nodes quite a bit from his original ideas on it. And I'm not sure if I can find the exact quote, but he
Just
actually,
just to explain to people, the modern conception is that these ideas of past lives and future lives more or less started with Rudyard's writings, which stemmed from early mid 20th century.
yeah. Although, again, Rudyard didn't really emphasize a past and future life the way it sort of
Yeah,
came to be
the
emphasized.
thing is that people
He,
understood it in that way. That's
People
the
took
thing.
it out of context, I think,
Yeah,
or they focused on one aspect of it, and to the, to the, and then ignored a lot of the other stuff he was saying. And it's really funny because he at some point actually talks about the south node as destiny, not the north node. And what he means by that is that while I'll just read some of what he's written.
yeah.
The north node refers to whatever builds the personality, bringing it new material. This material should not only be reabsorbed but metabolized. And this refers to reading books and absorbing new ideas, as well as to intake of anything which can become assimilated by the consciousness of the individual person. The south node refers to any material whatsoever, physical, emotional, psychic, or mental, which the organism no longer needs, whether it be that of substance that cannot be used and is in a decaying or poisonous condition, or that it is the positive and creative expression of the natural function of the body-mind organism. And so he goes on to talk about how basically while you assimilate stuff at the north node, positively you can release it at the south node, either kind of, metaphorically like fecal matter, you're getting rid of what you don't
Digestive
need.
system. I was thinking exactly about
Or,
the milk
yeah,
and
but
yeah.
or as in terms of like creativity, like giving birth to something, the childbirth and that whole sort of thing. And so what he talks about is that basically the north node is like where we're taking in stuff that more pertains to us individually, but the south node is where we can release what we've taken in a way that pertains to like the greater whole. It's like a sacrifice or a service. And as Ketu is the moksha karaka in Jyotish, right? It's moksha is basically coming when we give up that final attachment or we sacrifice something, basically, and oftentimes it's to the greater good. And some excellent examples of this are, I found when I was testing some of this out, that and actually I came to a similar conclusion through other means before I reread this Ridyar stuff, because I didn't really understand it years ago when I read it. But it's funny because it's like I noticed that like just by a basic analysis, Van Gogh and Beethoven, two like super creative artists who arguably changed their paradigms, right? It seemed like they had a stronger Ketu emphasis in their chart by some basic techniques of analysis. And you see them giving back to the world, like creating for something greater and more grand than just their own desires and self. And so I think that's a really powerful way to think about Ketu that's not often thought about, because Ketu just sort of gets relegated a lot of the time to like, oh, it's just like unconscious, it's habits, it's stuff that, you feel comfortable doing, but like leads to your downfall if you stay there, kind of a thing. But in reality, even if that is true, it's not the whole picture. It's just not the whole picture. And I think it's interesting too that Rahu Mahadasha is often much more difficult and traumatic for people than Ketu Mahadasha, which may be because Ketu is much shorter than Rahu. But it's interesting that we don't often find people in Rahu Mahadasha like manifesting or realizing their destiny. I've seen a lot of people in it just horribly struggling, like hitting the lowest of the low.
They're stuck in a carousel, and they
stuck in a carousel.
But the good thing is that if you have the Mahadasha when you're young, you mature.
Yes.
That illusion that calls you is no longer gonna be that powerful. But in the end, I think that we can extrapolate from this chat is that there's a lot to learn from the notes still. I mean, there's a lot to dissect. There's a lot to discover or rediscover, if you will, because they're confusing planets, and when you see them in a chart in terms of dispositors, associations, it gets even more complicated.
Sure.
And it refines the reading, and it refines the individual even more. But this idea that if you want to grow personally, go towards Rahu without a doubt. But the idea that this is gonna make your spirit evolve, that's not necessarily philosophically sound if you take into consideration, Vedic principles, in my opinion.
Yeah. And in kind of wrapping up, I'll say that, while I can understand the idea that, go towards Rahu, and that Rahu is stuff we're unfamiliar with that we need to assimilate or whatever. My experience in my own life and in looking at other people's charts and stuff is not really that it's an area we're unfamiliar with. It's more that it's just an area where
we are crazy about.
Yeah, there's a deep-seated obsession and compulsion with, and you may be very familiar with that area of life, but there may be something you feel that you haven't gotten out of it. There may be
Where do you have your Rahu? In what house?
Well, okay, I'll give away some of the details. Yeah.
No, I'll give mine. Mine is in Taurus in the 6th house.
Yeah, mine's in the 6th house in Aquarius with some other planets.
You know what they say about that's the best position for Rahu.
It is, because Ketu's in the 12th, which is his natural house, moksha and that sort of thing. But yeah, no, I just what I mean is that I found that I am familiar with the things that Rahu has brought on some level, but that maybe I haven't been satisfied with them, or there's something that I still have felt like I need to figure out with them, and so on and so forth. So it's just two slightly different ways to think about it. They're not necessarily going to change the interpretation. It's just like these are the subtle mechanisms we get into in astrology. And so for me, it's really just about it's about dealing with both nodes. Like, why are you rejecting Ketu? Why are you rejecting whatever that symbolizes? Why are you becoming obsessed with it in a different way than Rahu? Rahu, you're obsessed with it, like maybe chasing it in the world, but Ketu, you're like idealizing something. You're putting it on this grand pedestal. Like, why are you doing that? Like, why? On either end, like, what is that compulsion that's propelling you into kind of these altered states of consciousness and mental fog sometimes,
It's the modern idea of progress.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's the modern idea of
progress,
of accumulative process of progress. I'm sorry, accumulative progress. The idea of, let's continue on forward, because forward, the future is where our problems will end in the future, which is also the same modern discourse in terms of political power, in terms of even religious epistemology, o sea, in terms of theology, the future. Let's think about the future. Let's go there.
Right, but we have to deal constructively with our past. Otherwise, our future is just going to be a repetition of our past.
But what you got to do is live in the present and bring both together, right?
Yeah, bringing both together.
And that's the idea I expound, bringing them together, doing what Rahu tells you to do, using that Ketu, and, balancing them in a way that makes you evolve in your mind consciousness, that makes you evolve as a person in order for you to win the game of life, or to exceed in the game of life that you've chosen to partake in. That's how I want to see.
Deal with it, like interface with it. Don't like control it or try to hide from it, that sort of thing. And in Tibet,
you can't hide from it, actually.
No, you can't.
Unless you get your Rahu Mahadasha very late in life or very early.
Or just avoidance and that sort of thing, conscientious avoidance. And in Tibet, Rahu is called Rahula, and it's not even always represented as split in half. It's represented as this powerful being of cosmic fire. And for the Tibetans, it's the 8th graha. It's not the 8th and 9th. So it's one being. And they propitiate Rahula for basically removing the difficulties brought by the other planets. That's what they use Rahula for. So it's different, it's like this idea that cosmic fire, which is sometimes represented as Agni in the Vedas, right, can come and purify whatever's going on and give you kind of like a new start, or a way to get beyond the shadows and just, see things as they are, and so on. So I think, there's just, it's wonderful how many different ways we can understand and play with the nodes. And I think my main inspiration in making this series was to just kind of like explore this stuff, and so that people who watch it, they can come along for the ride, and it's about learning how to not get trapped in like, this is the only way that it is. There's all these different ways, and you got to explore them all and see what makes sense to you, and then just practice that.
And use what better suits you.
Exactly.
You're not going to use an extra large shirt if you are a small size, and you're not going to use a jacket if you live in the tropics. I mean, you just gotta.
Hopefully not.
You just gotta. I live in the tropics, and I'm having a no sleeve shirt today.
Nice. You
just gotta do what feels right to you.
Exactly.
And if that means killing someone, or if that means giving a lot of money to someone.
Killing someone. Jesus.
I'm not promoting murder, but I know. You just got to live your path in life, and everybody has a different path. And if Rahu calls you, you got to do what Rahu calls you. But life is a game.
Yeah.
And the rule books, you make them up in many ways. But Definitely. You got to be honest with yourself. You got to do what your dharma tells you to do. You gotta do whatever your karma, your moksha, your kama, your artha entails to you, and you just gotta live life as ever you want. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. You just gotta make it up. And in the end, what your mind creates has a lot to do with what you think truth is in many ways. I'm not saying that truth is an absolute subjectivity, because that's not what I'm saying. It's a mixture of both in many ways. But, the end is, how can the spirit be evolving if it's ever present, omniscient, perfect? That's where the dilemma comes in with the nodes. And we've kind of discussed it, and we've given a few ideas, and, they can take it or leave it. Maybe we should, retouch, and that's not the word. Maybe we should take this topic once again when we're 42, 43, when Rahu evolves, right?
Sure, right.
Although we have it in the 6th house, so I don't know how that's going to be. But or we can discuss it after we're 50 when Ketu evolves, also matures, evolves.
Sure.
When Ketu matures,
Evolve, yeah.
yeah, maybe
Sure.
then we're gonna have because that's when you have the life experience of your current life to understand those
Right.
nodes
Right.
in theory. Because I'm 33 years old, I still have a long way to go. I still have like 17 years to go there. So once we have the experience, maybe we can better discuss this very Confucius topic in many ways.
Yeah, very well put. All right,
Thank you.
well, I think that wraps it up for this video. Yeah, thanks for joining me, man. It was an excellent discussion.
Always a
And,
pleasure.
all right, so yeah, I'll see you guys next time, and hit like and subscribe if you want to stay current on the videos I'll be uploading and whatnot. And Fernando and I are still making a bunch of tarot videos together on Vanita's page, VL Astrology. And we're doing stuff as well with Ashwin of Celestial Vibes all the time. So check out those two pages as well. And have a great day.